Arthur drew his sword in preparation as he began to make his way downward. His team stayed alert, their caution heightened simply because he was there. He even found himself doubting the newcomer. Arthur eventually makes it clear that he stands with the humans as their supporter. Helen and her teammates smiled warmly as they welcomed the boy into their group. Spots the person who has captured all of his attention lately. Despite everything, she appeared to be the most stunned of all. She hadn't acknowledged him in any way, for reasons he couldn't understand. Interrupts the group's fun, reminding everyone that they have an important task to complete. Since no one had informed him about Arthur's involvement, asks for an explanation of what happened. The warrior admitted that he had received word just an hour before and hadn't anticipated finding himself surrounded by a horde of mana beasts. Could hardly believe his eyes when he realized that Arthur had defeated all the mana beasts alone, even managing to take down the powerful S-class mutant by himself. A single boy displayed a power that rivaled what a whole battalion had spent weeks getting ready to face. The adventurers all began to wonder just how strong this child truly was. Standard wondered what had happened to the beast cores. Arthur clarified that the bond he possessed consumed them gradually over a period of time. The small creature standing in front of them had effortlessly consumed hundreds of beast cores, as if it were the easiest thing in the world. And his group were out on an excursion when a creature suddenly lunged at Arthur from behind, attempting a surprise attack. Attempts to warn him. In just a few moments, the battle concludes and Arthur remains standing exactly where he started, untouched and unmoved. He expresses regret for forgetting one and mentions that he doesn't mind having a conversation, provided there's good food involved. Along with the members of the Twin Horns group, recognizes the man. They hope to give a sense of reassurance, and Helen gave her approval to their plan. Arthur noticed that his friends were doing well, which made him smile. He then hurried to join the group as they headed home together. Although the boy standing before her had once been her childhood friend, sensed a strange discomfort around him. Somehow, she had imagined their reunion would unfold differently than the reality she now faced. After many years apart, the two finally crossed paths once more. At their base, Arthur kept certain things to himself, choosing only to share the information that needed to be discussed. Felt a sense of dissatisfaction with the group, yet he recognized that the insights they had gathered were important for the battalion as they prepared their upcoming strategy. Jasmine walked away, leaving Arthur and by themselves. She noticed him standing by himself, and her heartbeat quickened with excitement. As he gazed at her, his chaotic thoughts spilled into words, all while an innocent smile played on his lips. The boy longed for her presence, having missed her deeply. Before his eyes grew weaker. With affection, she wrapped her arms around him, showing that her longing for him matched his own. Arthur reached out and softly cupped her face, teasingly calling her a crybaby while carefully brushing away the tears from her cheeks. Behaves as if she has already become an adult. Arthur chooses to spend this time listening carefully as she recounts all that has happened. Standard was outside, sharing a quiet moment with. The team felt a sense of disappointment because someone else took over the main fight they had been preparing for. Curry felt genuine relief and happiness that everyone had escaped the vicious battle unharmed. It seemed almost unbelievable that a single individual could defeat a group of elite monsters and even an S-class creature without anyone getting hurt. Suspicion deepened, and his jealousy grew stronger than it had been before. Standard questioned both of them, explaining how envy differs from jealousy. Becomes intensely enthusiastic. Eager to prove themselves, they sought an opportunity to face off against the newcomer in a duel. Both of his teammates silently acknowledged that the plan was foolish. Korea couldn't grasp the reason behind his intense anger, especially since Arthur had no chance of winning the war by himself. The green-haired boy couldn't shake off his doubts about Arthur's achievements, suspecting that something didn't add up and dismissing Arthur as an arrogant show-off. While this was happening, supported Arthur's perspective, believing that the townspeople had not treated Arthur any more kindly themselves. He considers it immature to judge Arthur's character without actually knowing him. Because constantly praised the boy, it was clear he couldn't be some sort of villain. After making up his mind, mocks Standard and believes the young man might finally have a chance with the princess, especially now that Arthur is treating her poorly. The two stood close, anger burning in their eyes as they exchanged harsh words meant to wound each other. Brought the fight to a halt as he recognized that persisting would make him just like his arrogant father, Meanwhile, Arthur found themselves in a different situation. Both of them emerged together once they had finished reconnecting. Notices a chance and confidently approaches Arthur. Without hesitation, he issued an immediate challenge for a duel. Without hesitation, a crowd quickly assembled, eager for amusement and showing strong support for. His teammates observed the situation with concern etched on their faces. He gripped his axe tightly, stepping forward to face Arthur. Someone is curious about the reason for the upcoming duel. The individual with green hair insisted that his sense of pride was at stake. Acting as the referee, reviewed the rules of the fight with the competitors before the match began. Both competitors were permitted to use mana solely for enhancing their physical abilities. Victory would go to whoever remained standing, as the match would end if someone gave up or couldn't continue. In this moment, finally realized the true extent of strength. He believed Arthur would face significant challenges out here, yet his curiosity about Arthur's real abilities remained strong. The battle starts as launches forward, moving so quickly that the figure moved close to Arthur, invading his personal space. The initial move had only been a distraction, meant to mislead, before circling behind him to deliver a strike where Arthur least expected it. Despite his youthful appearance, the boy reveals skills beyond those of a beginner as he quickly notices the approaching figure. Locked his gaze on Arthur, studying him intently. Recognizing the danger in Arthur's stance, sprang back, his movements betraying a hint of fear. The crowd watched his timid attempt with puzzled expressions, their voices rising in mockery as he stood there, surrounded by darkness. Tessia exchanged puzzled glances, uncertain about what was happening. The group had often witnessed dispatching mana beasts with effortless precision, as if it required no more effort than slicing through butter. On several occasions, he had also bested fellow adventurers of equal standing, clearly taking pride in his victories. In this moment, the scene felt almost surreal, as experienced fear on the battlefield for the very first time. Despite everything, the odd-looking individual with green hair moved forward to attack, while Arthur calmly shifted his weight from side to side, dodging every attack. Attempts to increase his speed by launching himself into the air for an aggressive strike. Arthur, however, simply raises his weapon and intercepts the swing of the axe. Before she struck, she unleashed only one powerful punch aimed directly at his abdomen. Found himself dispatched on a retreat, struggling to comprehend how anyone could move with such inhuman quickness. He hurls a massive chunk of soil yet. With just a light punch, Arthur effortlessly shatters it. Had once again used the attack as a strategy, aiming to catch Arthur off guard from a hidden angle. He avoids the attack with effortless agility. Arthur was simply playing with, lightly tapping him on both his front and back. He began to strike rapidly, his fists landing one after another in a fierce assault across his opponent's body. Arthur's blows land successfully just as he turns his back and leaves the scene, already triumphant. His arms hung useless at his sides, leaving him unable to move them. His grip loosened as his axes slipped from his hands and his body crumpled to the ground. The crowd remained frozen in confusion, for not a single onlooker had managed to catch what had just taken place. Tessia alone witnessed the moment when Arthur unleashed mana flow rupturing. With nothing but his hands, he managed to stop the flow of mana. This was remarkable, considering that usually make their channels even tougher after enhancing their bodies. Yet Arthur's action stood out. It was done with such accuracy and speed that he seemed like someone with years of experience. Acknowledges that an extraordinary event has just unfolded before them. Lay helpless on the ground, his body so battered and broken that he couldn't manage to stand. Without any warning, General Virion made a personal appearance to see Arthur. He had arrived by his side. Inside the camp, true to his usual grandfatherly demeanor, grabbed the boy by the collar, frustrated that he hadn't told anyone he was coming back. Arthur spotted as well, noticing the satisfaction on his face as he observed the growth and changes in both and Arthur. It was revealed that they had gotten word from Winsome regarding Arthur's exit. Alder had not anticipated that the boy would appear at its post so soon, but it became clear that Ren had orchestrated the encounter on purpose. The sly move was just like him. Admitted to herself that she was relieved to see Arthur step through the gate rather than facing a terrifying S-class magical beast. Arthur explained that there was no time to waste, since he was immediately beset by a horde of monsters the moment he arrived. Could hardly believe that Arthur's tale was true. He had actually defeated the monsters on his own. Curiosity filled her mind and countless questions raced through her thoughts. however, intervened, insisting that he needed to speak with the boy privately about his own concerns before anyone else could. Receives instructions to remain behind for the time being, while Arthur is informed that he will be accompanying the others as they depart. She felt frustrated as he was being pulled away from her so soon after his return. Arthur needed to explain the situation to them. Her grandfather points out that once this dungeon is dealt with, new challenges will await them. He reminds her that their team will face even more responsibilities and their workload is only going to increase. He hoped she would recall the terms of their agreement. She had taken on the role of a soldier, while he assumed the position of her commanding general. Upon hearing his instruction, felt a surge of happiness as she prepared to obey. She recalled his earlier guidance, reminding herself to increase her abilities gradually after each battle and to steadily grow stronger. Before departing, expresses his desire for the group to set out immediately. He noticed that had grown much stronger over the last several months, realizing that her recent experiences in battle had greatly contributed to her improvement. Arthur felt a surge of surprise when referred to as her master. The idea that they had developed a mentor-student bond was something he had never anticipated. Arthur then emerged from there. He enters the tent and notices smiling, acknowledges him with a salute, behaving as though the newcomer's presence holds too much significance to overlook. The trio made their way toward the teleportation gate. Chose not to talk to, noticing that had matured and seemed to be hiding her own secrets as well. Hoped to astonish her the next time they met. The trio entered through the gate together. They stepped outside and were immediately confronted by an enormous, intimidating bear waiting to greet them. Little suddenly appeared, peeking out from behind the bear's head. Arthur could hardly believe his eyes when he saw his sister perched atop the creature, utterly stunned by the sight. At first sight, she spots her brother and accidentally bumps into him. Arthur paused for a while, savoring the moment as he cherished his younger sister. He continued to tease her until noticed that both sets of their parents were nearby. Arthur, recalling the events of the previous encounter, attempts to distance himself. He is taken by surprise when they welcome him warmly, their affection unmistakable. The boy feels astonished that they would treat him with such kindness after everything that occurred. Alice, displaying the warmth of a devoted mother, gently reassures her son that, despite everything, he remains the child she has cared for over many years. Similarly, now sporting a beard, understands that his son has endured the most challenging parts of his preparation. Despite everything, Alice found it impossible to remain upset with Arthur for very long, her deep affection for him always softening her heart. The child beams with joy as he acknowledges that the two of them have given him far more than he could ever express gratitude for. Tugs at his shoulder, hoping to prompt him to bring up the topic of Boo. Arthur spotted the enormous creature and found it amusing that such a gigantic dog would have the name Boo. Boo, feeling challenged by the comment, attempted to unleash its entire strength upon Arthur's shoulder. Although the earth lay broken and ruined, the monster stared in disbelief as Arthur remained completely unharmed. He observes that the pet tends to have a rather fiery attitude. It became clear that had ordered her small companion to examine Arthur's abilities as soon as he came back. Arthur could hardly believe how well had connected with the beast. He tried to remember when the event had taken place. It seemed that Winsome had been secretly watching Arthur all along. Winsome had actually entrusted the mana beast to the boy's family before departing. In the end, Arthur had nothing to do with it. Arthur received the enormous bear as a present from him, and he couldn't believe anyone would consider gifting such a massive creature to his own sister. Recalls how the bear was just a small cub when it first joined them, but in only 2 years, Boo has grown up remarkably fast. Urged the group to hurry, explaining that their reunion would have to wait because more urgent issues needed their attention. He reassured the boy by assuring him that he would have plenty of opportunities to see his family, so there was no need for concern. Arthur said goodbye to those he cared about as he prepared to depart once more. For the first time, a sense of relief washed over them, knowing that the bear was finally safe and no longer alone. Two felt pleased about how things had turned out. In the following scene, the boy notices with astonishment that none of the royal family members are present to join their group. He had not anticipated encountering Director Good Sky there. Noticed the boy's confusion and took a moment to clarify the situation, describing how Good Sky had entered a deep sleep. The incident happened just after she tried to share crucial details about the Upon hearing those words, Arthur let out a pained groan, his expression filled with regret for what she had endured. He is eager to learn every detail about what happened. Several hours slipped by while the two rulers discussed events from the previous 2 years. Arthur needed updates on matters that neither Ren nor Winsome had shared with him. According to, the human king was now concentrating on strengthening ties with the kingdom in hopes of securing their alliance, and decided to follow his example, each assembling a team to gain first-hand experience working on the front lines. The boys' relatives remained within the castle walls, seeking safety from the dangers outside. Meanwhile, the family chose to find refuge in a different place. During this time, Vincent devoted himself to helping with the war effort as much as he could. Arthur wondered aloud to Virion whether his parents had expressed a desire to join the battle. It became clear that had been prepared to participate, but the elf had advised him to hold back and wait at least until Arthur came back. The boy felt deep gratitude for managing the situation so effectively. He would have experienced great sorrow if his father had passed away before he could see him again. The moment had come to discuss the primary topic of the meeting. Arthur realized his presence wasn't simply about being updated. He sensed a grave situation at hand, one so severe that participation had been deemed unwarranted. In response, Virion silently shook his head, seemingly rejecting that notion. Arthur interrupted the elderly man, insisting he understood the concern for his granddaughter's safety. He was well aware that the ongoing war endangered everyone. Even with their defensive strategies, Arthur realized they would be meaningless if spies had already established secret teleportation gates. A sense of unease crept over them, as the situation felt unusually suspicious. Arthur observed that the region provided an ideal location for the army to assemble. Considering they had already secured the S-class mana beasts, it seemed like a logical plan. However, Arthur realized this tactic would be predictable. This led him to conclude that the only explanation for the enemy's inaction so far must be something else. It seemed likely that possessed greater strength than, or perhaps the opposing side was deliberately delaying for a different purpose. It was clear from the way Virion's face twisted in discomfort. The boy recognizes that it is the latter of the two options. Virion acknowledges that they have only recently come across something similar. Began by reassuring Arthur that feeling skeptical toward them was understandable once he learned the truth. He unfolded a large blueprint, revealing the detailed design of a battleship. The vessel was clearly not the vessel had been constructed by taking inspiration from Arthur's original plans. The boy's anger flared as he crushed the paper in his hand, just as the conversation was shifting to a new topic. A soldier rushed into the room, bringing urgent news. The armies had been spotted advancing along the western coastline. The man's body trembles with fear while he announces that the ships have appeared. A chilling sense of fear filled the room, clearly reflected in the look on Arthur's face. Arthur didn't hesitate for even a moment as he dashed past the guard, moving with astonishing swiftness. Followed him closely, anxiety twisting in her stomach as she wondered what might unfold next. The boy moved with such incredible speed that the guards struggled in vain to catch up to him. Arthur's impatience grew so strong that he considered opening the door before the guard allowed it. The guard explains that they are unable to take any action unless one of the generals gives their approval. Because they still haven't received any updates from either person, they decide it's not safe to let him leave. Arthur then explains that he recently met with both individuals and got their approval to go. The guards displayed a level of arrogance far beyond what he had encountered before, making it clear through their actions that they would not allow him to pass, regardless of his convictions. They intended to caution him once more about the risks present beyond the safety of their shelter. Arthur decided he was finished with games, unleashing such an intense force that everyone nearby instantly felt their awareness shut down in fear. Arthur cautioned the group, insisting that now was not the moment to underestimate him. Approached to understand what was happening and gave Arthur permission to depart whenever he wished. Despite his concern, he cautions the youngster not to act impulsively, reminding him that such behavior would squander all the valuable instruction Winsome provided. The boy nods in agreement, then sprints toward the teleportation gate, quickly entering the coordinates for city. The director lay motionless, her mind trapped in a restless sleep filled with troubling dreams of those who had desperately sought the secrets she possessed. They urged her on, insisting that her expertise would play a vital role in changing the course of the war. After everything that happened, no one showed any concern for her well-being. This shaking nightmare was what drove her to act. After a period of unconsciousness, the character slowly awakens. Throughout the years, Good Sky had always assumed she had escaped the curse's grasp. The memory brought back thoughts of her last discussion with Virion during the Great War, a time when they had spent years as adversaries, yet he had always remained mindful of a single important truth. She playfully suggested that he might be in love with her. Rejected the accusation of cheating, confident in his own loyalty. Still, his thoughts kept returning to how Good Sky had a powerful influence over young people. He often imagined her as a wise leader at a prestigious academy, inspiring young people to achieve their brightest futures. The idea had struck Virion unexpectedly, yet his determination remained unshaken. He strongly encouraged her to take up teaching, convinced that the position suited her perfectly. At that moment, considered the possibility of starting an academy in city. She found the idea intriguing and decided to tell about the school's opening. He dismissed the suggestion with a laugh and insisted that he had not been involved. He sometimes considered the idea of having his attend when they became old enough. Viewed the situation as an opportunity and set her sights on transforming the academy into the most prestigious institution worldwide. Cherished the tender moment between them, both of them dreaming about the day they would commemorate the academy's grand opening together. From that moment forward, Good Sky's recollections became tainted and unclear. She realizes she is injured and feels sharp pain as blood seeps from her wound. Virion stirred awake, emerging from his slumber in the present moment. After a piercing scream echoed through the building, she stepped outside to investigate. The guards, now on high alert, rushed straight down to the ground floor. Suddenly understood with dread that something was threatening Anna. Arthur raced ahead at top speed, moving faster than anyone else around him. He grew increasingly irritated as others blocked his way, so he signaled to the guards, urging them to unlock the doors. The bothersome soldier believed that someone as young as Arthur had no place in a significant fight. He carried himself with arrogance, but in an instant, everything changed. The sight of the enormous dragon alone causes them to shake with terror. Arthur felt no hesitation about forcing his way through if anyone dared to stand in his path. He takes flight alongside, who has grown into a striking dragon with elegant horns. An overwhelming rush of thoughts filled the boy's mind. He recalls when the ship's blueprint was first created. Found herself surrounded by a blanket of snow. From that point forward, Arthur continued his journey as thick snowflakes fell all around him. His advice echoed in their mind, urging them to focus on moving ahead rather than dwelling on past mistakes. Regarding Virion, he pushed through determinedly, intent on reaching his room. He suddenly notices Good Sky lying in ruins. She had fallen victim to leaving only a crimson stain on her bed where she once lay. Let out a heart-wrenching cry, overwhelmed by the pain of witnessing yet another dear person slip away from his life. Arthur, his courage evident, acknowledges to himself that he has found a new motivation to continue battling. From the snow-covered peak, he watches the approaching fleet of warships. The boy has found a new purpose in battle, seeking redemption for his past mistakes. With this, the real conflict is set in motion. The scene ended abruptly, leaving the story on a suspenseful note. Now, the narrative shifts to the center of a vibrant, blue-lit city, where a burglary is unfolding before the reader's eyes. Two children set out with hopes of striking it rich. One person attempted to unlock the door using lock-picking skills as another stood watch nearby, keeping an eye out for trouble. The lock was now complete, and just as one might expect from a young boy. Takes great pride in his abilities. He wanders through the area, looking for anything of worth. The boys convinced themselves that their actions were justified and essential. He believed that taking from another person could be excused if it meant saving his own orphanage. The money held great value, not because it was needed for their own use, but because it was meant to support the orphanage. The boy standing there was Arthur's former incarnation, known as King Gray, who had recently completed his mission. Gray wondered whether it was wise to place their trust in someone willing to make a deal with a group of teenagers. Despite Gray's doubts, appeared completely self-assured, exuding a confidence that seemed unshakable. Standing outside in the chilly air, they knocked on the man's door and grew increasingly frustrated as the moments dragged on. The man eased the door open, bracing himself for the arrival of the two bothersome children. Explained that he and his friend had come to the location to sell their goods. The man gestures for them to come in. However, they quickly recoil, surprised by an unusual but powerful odor that fills the air. After finishing his instructions, directed Gray to survey the area. Following his lead, Gray began to walk through the warehouse, observing his surroundings carefully. As the man carefully examined the gemstone's quality, he turned his attention to a nearby book, reviewing its contents with focused interest. For the very first time, the boy stumbled upon an old manual that explained how to master the art of controlling. Approached quietly from behind, causing Gray to jump in surprise. However, Gray quickly assured himself that it was no big deal. The man extended the book toward the boy, intending it as a present. In the end, the gesture held little practical value, since neither he nor the others possessed the ability to read or gain knowledge from its pages. Didn't mind that their relationship was just a casual one. That night, after the boys had gone, Gray stood alone in the pouring rain, his thoughts swirling with confusion over the reason he had been sent to this place. Managed nearly every task on his own. Observed that despite everything, Gray managed to hold on to a book. At that moment, Gray warned his friend about the presence of two unsettling men lingering near the shop. Those men were secretly following the group from a distance. He motioned for it to veer to the right and sprint away as quickly as possible. Without hesitation, the two boys dashed off together, moving at the fastest pace they could manage. The two of them scaled the wall together but lost his balance and tumbled down on the other side, prompting Gray to step in and assist him back to his feet. Both of them crouched behind a garbage can and, without much thought, made an awkward attempt to creep up on the men. At last, one of their pursuers had finally found where they were hiding. He reached out to grab, but before he could succeed, his friend yanked him down. He urged to escape quickly. He used his bag to defend himself while struggling against the man. Stumbled, making things even harder for the group. Gray reached for the bag, signaling to the two men, fully aware that their pursuit was driven by the lure of the money. He created a diversion by drawing attention to himself and took off at a sprint. The boy eventually spotted something in the distance. He paused and shifted his gaze toward them. He sent a can flying with a powerful kick, causing the first person to lose their balance and slip without caution. He sprang upward, propelling himself over by using the first man's body as a springboard. Gray glanced into the puddle and noticed another attacker approaching from behind. The clever boy swiftly avoided the blow, moving out of harm's way before the punch could land. He responded by launching a fierce punch in return. The forceful punch, delivered with all his power, shattered the man's nose and left him drenched in blood. This gave Gray an opportunity to get away alongside his friend. After they managed to get away, eagerly explained to Gray why he had been included. Revealed that Gray possessed remarkable fighting skills, allowing him to stand his ground even against opponents far stronger than himself. Gray himself insisted he was unaware of what had transpired, describing the moment as if time had suddenly begun to move in slow motion for him. Clearly recalls how the boy managed to grab falling dishes with remarkable speed and agility. From an early age, had no doubt that his friend possessed an extraordinary talent for combat, though he couldn't quite explain why. Both boys rushed upstairs, eager to reach their rooms before being discovered by anyone. Felt a surge of fear at every tiny noise. However, just as they continued at a painfully sluggish pace, a single voice summoned the two, urging them to hurry over. The group asked them to pause for a moment as Gray questioned whether the headmaster had already figured things out. At first, doubted it, but considering the headmaster's magical abilities, he realized it was impossible to know for sure. They made their way upstairs at a slow pace, heading toward her room before. Both boys met a strikingly attractive girl who happened to be their peer in age. The headmaster wished that the three would develop a strong friendship with one another. Arthur's daydream faded away when he opened his eyes and found himself back in his own room. The boy gently pressed his lips to his father's cheek while softly stroking the tiny, fluffy animal in his arms. He hadn't recalled a dream from his former life in quite some time. He gazes out the window, watching as winter settles over the landscape. When the boy heard a knock on the door, he instructed his assistant to enter the room. The man announces that the meeting place has been confirmed, prompting Virion to instruct him to get ready immediately. Arthur stood in confusion for a brief moment, only to find himself face to face with three of his maids. Quickly realizes that the maids harbor strong feelings for Arthur. She then questions him, pointing out that he seems interested only in princesses. Slight irritation flickered across his face at her comment, and he let her know that he had no qualms about fighting her right there. Both of them approached the two generals together. Arthur, once a boy and now matured, stood tall and impressive in his freshly tailored clothes. Virion playfully mocked Arthur as he snapped a few photos of him, claiming it was for. Meanwhile, Arthur showed his irritation with how difficult it was to wear the elaborate outfit. Suggests to the group that they should hurry and continue on their way. The three notable individuals move side by side, keeping close to one another as they proceed. Virion's health had shown noticeable improvement following the heartbreaking loss of. Arthur realizes that given the circumstances, the man has no option except to stand firm. He follows behind, his mind tangled with questions about how the clan managed to reach Good Sky initially. Arthur knows this mystery must be weighing heavily on him. Virion wondered aloud whether the young boy was now ready to face the emissaries from the clan. Arthur felt that it was the old man who needed to be prepared more than anyone else. The old man's curiosity burned intensely, desperate to uncover the identity of the person responsible for Good Sky's death. Virion abruptly changed the subject, interrupting the conversation to emphasize that Arthur's survival was the most important thing. If they failed to comply, it would end both of their lives. Completed the last of their preparations, and together the two of them leapt off. Arthur hurries after, making his way down beside her. Summoned a glowing orb to aid in their journey. Arthur, regal and confident, climbed onto the back of his magnificent dragon, preparing for the journey ahead. Both groups moved forward at the same pace. Arthur appeared more serious than he ever had before. Felt a wave of concern, wondering whether he was okay. He reassured her that he was all right, though he admitted he was a bit taken aback by how she had started addressing him by his name recently. Had imparted valuable lessons to her about the pride of dragons and the importance of holding oneself with confidence. Arthur recalled his last training session that took place in the distant land of. He found himself called upon directly by, first. The boy believed that surprises no longer existed for him. Everything changed when he noticed position beside the man. Gladly took the opportunity to present him to his wife. The boy had only come this far because she had been there to support him. His unexpected arrival unsettled him more than anything else. She appeared more youthful than she had in years. However, it was second message that suddenly made all his training seem insignificant. Mana orbs floated in the air surrounding the group. Halted time with his abilities, choosing that moment to leave the young human with a single crucial suggestion before he departed. The guidance remained undisclosed. Virion informed him that they were nearing their destination and reminded him to remain alert. He worries about attending the meeting alone without the protection of guards. However, Alder assures him that he will step in without hesitation if the messenger's information turns out to be false. After discovering risky experiments and acts of betrayal, it became impossible to predict their future actions. Virion could only speculate about's next move, realizing that for their main adversary, the entire war seemed to be nothing but a trivial pastime. Notes that is unable to join the battle directly, so it makes sense that he takes on the role of general, orchestrating the conflict from behind the scenes to advance his own interests. Then raised a question, curious about who held the power to determine the destiny of those considered less significant. At this point, needed to remind him of his role as the leader of humanity up to now. Virion found himself needing to reassure himself nightly, clinging to his fearful stance. He had no real choice in the matter and seemed to be pushed into it against his will. Glanced upward at Arthur and suggested that the two of them should accompany the group for the time being. Arthur found the suggestion appealing, and Alo shared his enthusiasm. She planned to keep herself out of sight to avoid being noticed, yet she remained ready to step in and protect Arthur whenever the situation demanded it. She shifted into her tiny form while Arthur moved to stand with the group of generals. High above, they catch sight of the battleships below. Arthur became certain that the message they had received was no ordinary communication. The group made their way down onto one of the ships. The unsettling envoys greeted the newcomers. Who appeared more human than the others, stepped forward and stated his name, stood closely by his side. Unlike ordinary messengers, both ends served as loyal retainers. Many stories had reached their ears about the legendary Asuras who inhabited the land of. The purpose of this meeting was to ensure that the Asuras would not become involved in the conflict. Makes it clear that he will stay out of the situation, provided that their group follows the rules. Found himself fascinated by the gifted boy who captured everyone's admiration. Arthur stood before them, responding with curiosity as he wondered aloud about the reason they had met the retainers so soon. Remained self-assured, insisting that their actions were merely those of messengers who never actually intended to let the others catch a vulnerable. Took great pleasure in playing that particular role, which made him cautious around those nearby. Meanwhile, cautioned, reminding him not to take things too far. He acted with extreme confidence, knowing that the Asuras were unable to interfere in this battle. The Asura insisted on receiving the message immediately, clarified that their leader had sent him to share just a single message. According to the order he brought, the ruling families of the continent were commanded to surrender. If they chose to honor the terms of the agreement, the others would remain unharmed. However, any ongoing defiance would guarantee total ruin for their people. Upon receiving the message, his anger surged, and he scoffed at how absurd the conditions were, recognizing them as nothing but a thinly veiled threat. Insisted that for them, this situation was actually a blessing in disguise, believing it was their only opportunity for survival. The grinning oddity confidently promised to show mercy by choosing the first method to end their lives. Found himself needing to caution his reckless retainer, emphasizing that fighting was not the purpose of their visit. However, the retainer showed no concern for words and simply insisted he was only offering a warning. In an attempt to provoke even further, he brings up his granddaughter, boasting that he'll take pleasure in killing her as is forced to witness the act. Arthur found himself deeply irritated by the comment, his agitation so intense that he called forth his blade. However, events began to unfold before he could act. Had already delivered a sharp slap across the man's face. That outcome was precisely what he had hoped for. He dismissed the significance of the assault and exposed his broken horn. He was the one responsible for bringing down Lance and leaving her in a terrible condition. Suddenly, a flood of memories rushed over Arthur, igniting a surge of anger within him. She rushes forward, eager to find out whether he was responsible for Lance's death. She was the person who had been cast into the dungeon, where her limbs were cut off before she died. Arthur's expression twisted into one of intense, violent intent as he posed his question. Pauses for a moment, considering the idea in a relaxed manner. He was unable to recall exactly which victim it had been, as he had killed numerous people in that same brutal manner. Suddenly, memories of the stunning elf he had wounded flash through his mind. With a sly grin, taunts Arthur, silently daring him to act first. He lets out a mocking laugh right in front of the boy. Found himself barely able to hold back, forcing himself to stay in control. Reached out and placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. Remained close by, ready to hold him back if needed. The adorable ball of fluff never left her father's side, always looking out for him. Rather than allowing his emotions to take over, he wonders aloud whether any other significant topics need to be addressed, or if the simply intended to deliver a clear warning. Besides that, grants them a total of 2 days to reach their decision. Should the royal families remain unreturned within this, the army will interpret the lack of response as their final answer. After that, both groups stepped away from the conflict, choosing to disengage. Continued to provoke Arthur, his actions only fueling Arthur's determination further. He recalls how his desperate screams shook him, making it nearly impossible for him to deliver the final, fatal strike. She had been deliberately kept alive for an extended period, enduring continuous suffering. He had now lost all sense of reality. Arthur unleashed a surge of energy that sizzled through the air, narrowly missing both retainers as it shot past them. Found the move both impressive and adorable. The object finally reached the ocean, where it erupted in a thunderous explosion. Arthur's expression grew intense, clearly warning that anyone challenging him seriously would be in trouble. He glanced over his shoulder, determined to resolve their conflict through combat. Arriving at its position, the team gathered around to collect the scattered remains of the monsters that Arthur had defeated. They carefully followed each step of the collection process, making sure everything was done accurately. They took great care to remove the horns and fangs with precision. They required rare materials in order to craft stronger weapons, since those resources were essential for their improvement. The green-haired troublemaker continues to act just as cocky as always. He was angry that the team remained occupied with removing useful materials from the remains of the monsters. The group found themselves in trouble when Arthur's small creature consumed every last core, leaving unable to create any additional ammunition for his weapon and placing him at a serious disadvantage. No one could fathom how such a small bond had managed to consume so many cores all at once. The green-haired troublemaker suspects that Arthur may have taken some of the monster cores for himself. He is also baffled by the sight of a massive pile of monster corpses, unable to understand how they became heaped together like that. The group speculates that perhaps Arthur orchestrated the scene for attention, hoping to look impressive, an idea that could have been planted by the author to make Arthur stand out. However, dismisses this notion, pointing out that these particular beasts are not like ordinary monsters, they act far more deranged than usual. Suggests that the monsters probably teamed up in a frenzied attempt to capture Arthur as a group, but their plan completely backfired. Standard's intelligence became clear as he took charge and guided the group's actions. A sudden tremor jolted him back to awareness, breaking through his daze. Behind him, the fool barely registered the seriousness of what was happening. Although nothing has surfaced yet, there are unmistakable signs that hidden events are unfolding in the background. The scene shifted back to who was nearly finished with the extraction procedure. Progress through the adventures lagged more than normal since there were no prizes available to gather. Adam simply felt relieved that they were spared from dealing with the most unpleasant aspects of the process. Wondered aloud what the two were excited about once the raid was over. It became clear that their plans included heading back to city to restock their supplies before setting off for their next dungeon adventure. The elf princess felt little enthusiasm when she realized they would simply head back to the flying castle and wait there until they received instructions for their upcoming mission. Adam chuckled and insisted that she take as much time as she needed to relax and make the most of this break. As addressed the group, Jasmine and Carria's attention shifted to an odd sight in the distance. Examined the glowing wall closely, noticing that its makeup struck him as unusually strange. Just as everyone let their guard down, sudden fractures began snaking across the surface, spreading rapidly. The barrier stood on the verge of crumbling. Told his friends nothing except that they needed to escape as quickly as possible. The group bolted in fear when a horde of orcs suddenly emerged from behind them. None of the group anticipated the sudden danger, yet instinctively each one shifted into a defensive stance, ready to confront whatever approached. Along with Helen's entire team suddenly understood just how serious their predicament had become. The monsters overwhelmed them, effortlessly tearing through each adventurer as if they were nothing more than soft butter. In the midst of the chaos, the most conceited troublemaker received a harsh blow from an exceptionally forceful strike. Crashes to the ground as advances, her vines unfurling around her. Using her usual tactics, she traps the creatures, making it easy for Helen to take them down with her impressive archery skills. However, none of them anticipated that an orc would suddenly strike from the side, catching them off guard. The massive creature charged straight at the two fighters, yet both managed to dodge skillfully, escaping harm. From witnessing the battle, found herself fixated on a single bewildering thought. She couldn't understand how Arthur, known as a one-man army, had managed to defeat nearly 1,000 of these monsters on his own. Found himself barely able to fend off a single orc, clearly overwhelmed as he fought to keep control of the situation. Advanced confidently, her formidable gauntlets gleaming as she intervened just in time to rescue him from danger. Without hesitation, she arrived to forcefully set him straight, determined to make him see reason. At that moment, struggled to move freely, his abilities hindered by the aftereffects of Arthur's technique, which had left his mana channels in disarray. As the leader of the group, instructed her teammates to gather as many soldiers as they could and head quickly toward the door. The group immediately put their plan into action, sprinting away as a horde of monsters charged after them in hot pursuit. At that moment, Jasmine moved in with elegance, stepping forward to shield them from trouble. She sprang back on her own and swiftly cut down a cluster of orcs with little effort. Meanwhile, the rest of the adventurers were in the process of being guided to safety. Standard and Helen's group continued to provide cover for their allies. Adam was giving his all, his spear strikes radiating with impressive skill and determination. Despite his efforts, he began to gasp for breath, exhausted by the intensity of the battle. Without warning, a massive blast erupts from the area behind them. He realizes that stepped in to protect him moments ago, urges him to concentrate on the more serious dangers approaching, rather than getting caught up in trying to return the favor. Both of them are caught off guard as a wall of twisting vines suddenly bursts forth, shielding them from harm. And Helen were behind it all. The pair, known for their cheerful energy, had just come to the rescue of the two clowns. The barrier hardly seemed valuable enough to matter. The orc tore through it without effort, making an opening for the other monsters to come in. Adam swiftly drew his spear and drove it forcefully into one of the orcs, striking with fierce determination. Helen arrived just in time, firing a rapid shot that brought down 3 monsters simultaneously. Adam found himself genuinely amazed by the number of opponents Helen had defeated, and it was clear to anyone watching that she was excelling in the heat of the battle. Yet, even as the two shared a calm moment of conversation, found himself being overpowered by the destroyer, who showed no hesitation in asserting dominance. Adam and Helen rushed forward together, determined to rescue their friend without hesitation. The spear sliced cleanly through the creature's body. This gave them the chance to save who had been injured. As Helen lands the decisive blow, she brings the monster to its defeat. Notices that Helen is caught in a dangerous situation. She struggled alone, facing danger in a precarious situation. Adam noticed that another orc was sneaking up to attack her from the side while she was trapped, so he moved quickly to alert her. The situation took a dire turn when the monster's claw stretched menacingly toward her face, confirming her fears that the worst was coming true. His face filled with concern just before she let out a startled cry, leaving the scene to end on a suspenseful note. The scene shifted once more to the soaring castle high above the clouds. After stepping through the teleportation gate, Arthur and Virion appeared together, having just faced the retainers. Arthur silently wished that Virion was not entertaining the proposal they had just received. Despite the heavy burden he felt, Virion wrestled with the consequences of his choice, believing that giving in now and avoiding conflict might ultimately protect countless innocent lives from harm. Arthur remains convinced that this is a serious mistake, believing the cost could be so great that even his own family might be required to pay the price. Found himself agreeing with the boy's perspective, noting that, in his view, would face danger as well under these circumstances. The coming generations would inevitably turn against the other Asuras, and Virion understood just how serious this situation had become. Arthur felt a deep concern about how the public might respond to the news. He soon understood that intended to make the offer known to everyone. Everyone could already guess how the situation would unfold. The crowd prepared to turn against the royal family with vicious hostility, eager to tear them apart. In response, Virion shared a wise saying.
Ulfred realized that the boy's remarkable talent explained how he had earned the title of Lance at such a young age. Initially, Ulfred had believed the council might have overstated the boy's abilities. Micah, brimming with excitement, wanted to know what it was like for Arthur to control all the basic elements. Before Arthur could respond, Sylvie quickly intervened, cautioning Micah to be more discreet with such sensitive information. Arthur confessed that managing unpredictable forces such as gravity posed a real challenge for him. As a mage who could control 4 elements, he often struggled to decide which spell to use, overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices at his disposal. Ulfred insisted on having a few elements that felt comfortable to him, and Arthur agreed with this idea. It's important to remember, especially for those who might have missed it or need a refresher, that Arthur's preferred elements are fire and water, as these make him feel at ease. Mika expressed an interest in helping their son learn gravity magic, noticing that he often had trouble using it. Arthur revealed that his main problem was a lack of confidence rather than skill. Mika launched into a simple explanation of gravity magic, her words making the concept sound almost laughably basic. Ulfrod thinks Arthur would have better luck picking up gravity magic from a stone than from this fool. Still, he points out Mika's brilliance. She stands out as the most gifted, even when compared to legendary dwarven conjurers. Mika's mastery of magic comes from sheer instinct rather than formal study. She lacks a basic understanding of how to control mana. Mika descended from the founders of the Earthborn Institute. When Arthur learned this, he was astonished, recalling how the Institute stood as the foundation of the Dwarven Kingdom's power. Until now, Mika had never realized her heritage connected her to such a prominent family. Micah absorbs the compliments with pride and begins to celebrate her own attractiveness. Ulfred makes sure to remind her of her lifelong single status, deflating her confidence with sharp words. His relentless teasing frustrates her so much that she suddenly brandishes an enormous mace, ready to strike back. Ulfred summoned his golem magic to defend himself, yet Mika's intense rage made it clear she was determined to take him down. She wishes she could make it clear to him that dwarves have never been her preference. While chaos continues to unfold around them, Artur and Sylvie do their best to stay out of sight, hoping to avoid danger. Both of them have no interest in getting involved in the trouble erupting nearby. Mika's outburst showed no signs of slowing, yet Ulfred remained just as relentless. He completely shattered her defenses by exposing the fact that her good reputation was owed solely to her privileged upbringing. Mike openly insulted her by calling her a fossil with the maturity of a sperm, leaving everyone stunned by his boldness. As their fierce fight continued to rage, Arthur and Sylvie decided they wanted no part of it and quietly slipped away from the chaotic scene. Micah had nicknamed him Old Fred, a choice that always brought a smile. The cleverness of her teasing was something to admire. Both of them often accused each other of being immature, and their playful arguments quickly escalated into a full-blown battle. At last, Arthur steps in and casts a gentle water spell, sending droplets onto both of their faces. He points out that their argument is so intense, they might end up demolishing the very mountain beneath their feet. Arthur then proposes that they invite the Vritra clan to resolve the matter once and for all. The two lances averted their gazes, each continuing to criticize the other quietly once out of sight. As the evening approached, Ulfred used his mastery over earth magic to set up a campsite for the night. Mika amused everyone with her antics, mirroring his actions but adding her own twist by boldly raising a middle finger in response. At the same time, Arthur comes to the surprising conclusion that the continent's mightiest powers are really just a group of immature individuals. He decides not to prepare anything and simply lies down to sleep beside Sylvie. The next morning arrives with everyone awake and prepared for action. Ulfred discovers that Arthur has come up with a strategy to track down both the retainer and the scythe they need. He begins by removing his jacket and letting it fall to the floor. Without hesitation, the figure crushed it fiercely underfoot, leaving both generals utterly bewildered by what had just happened. Arthur held up the worn and torn clothes, showing them to Mika with a hint of pride, and explained that these shabby garments were what they would have to wear. Their strategy centers on pretending to be slaves. In this scheme, Ulfred takes on the role of the slave master. Arthur extended his damaged note mask, reflecting on how it reminded him of his past adventures. While soaring through the sky, Ulfred carefully tinkered with Arthur's mask, mending its cracks by filling them with gleaming gold. Their strategy involves passing through Valden territory before continuing their journey on foot. Arthur is well aware that scythes possess the ability to detect even distant changes in mana. They follow through with their plan and set foot on the shore. Arthur explains that scouts from Elecria never come this far looking for lances, and that it's rare to see adventurers in masks. Because of this, they will be able to gather the information they need from the people in town. Sylvie felt a sense of unease, fearing that the townspeople might betray them and reveal their location to the Alcrian soldiers. Arthur feels confident that the situation is unlikely to occur, but if it does, he plans to focus on finding a way to escape first. Arthur observed with curiosity that a second lancer had been dispatched to follow them covertly. However, he realized he could not detect any trace of this person's presence. After a moment of thought, he affirmed to himself that Aya was the one he had sent. She had earned the nickname Phantasm because of her remarkable ability to become nearly invisible before eliminating her targets. As they approached the main road, it became clear that it was the right moment for them to put on convincing disguises. Arthur ran his hands through his hair, leaving it in disarray. While Mika sank into a wave of misery, Ulfred basked in a sense of triumph. Arthur, eager to make his performance believable, rubbed soil onto his cheeks. Micah couldn't help but imagine frightening scenarios, his mind restless with worry, yet he understood it was only normal for people like them to blend in and get their hands dirty without drawing attention. Arthur unleashed a rapid barrage, flinging handfuls of dirt toward her with relentless energy. Despite Mika's best efforts to avoid the flying mud, she still gets splattered, which clearly delights Ulfred. Although she felt frustrated about not being chosen as the master, Arthur believed the reason was clear. Given her youthful appearance, it was unlikely anyone would take them seriously. Despite any earlier worries, the group arrived as planned, fully prepared with their disguises in place. The current plan involved traveling along the road in order to reach the closest town. After some time walking, Ulfred noticed a group of men passing by on horseback and called out to them. He explains to the group that, following an attack on their carriage by bandits, their journey is now taking them north. Ulfred comes up with a convincing reason for wearing his mask, claiming that he conceals his face to protect his identity and ensure his own safety. The dwarves felt sorry for him, yet they refused to let him join them because their horses were already burdened and could not carry any more weight. Despite what made sense, everyone knew the power of money often drowned out logic. At the mere glint of silver coins, these fools quickly convinced themselves. At first, Mika feels a surge of happiness. The carriage owner informed them that neither slave would be allowed to ride and that both must make the journey on foot. The unfortunate girl found herself defeated once more, left with no choice but to begin a long walk that would take her at least an hour. Mika did not expect Arthur to be familiar with this region. He knew this place well, having spent his childhood in this modest town. After spending an hour on foot, Arthur pauses to look around his hometown, realizing it has been quite a while since he last visited. Even Sylvie had remained unaware of the situation. Sadly, Ashbur appeared more exhausted now than at any time before. As they moved forward, Ulfred noticed that the tavern held no fewer than 40 men inside. Mika, however, remembers a total of at least 43. Arthur cautioned the lances against using magic, warning that it could attract the attention of the scythes. However, the reality was that none of them had been channeling mana at all. They simply possessed a strong intuition when it came to understanding others. However, this situation fills Arthur with anxiety, since he realizes their scheme will be ruined if the group notices Aya trailing behind them. The group stepped into the tavern, and Arthur immediately began cautioning them about the things they should avoid. The two sat together at the table while the waitress approached to collect their orders. Ulfrid completes preparing the order. After the attractive stranger walked away, Nika felt frustrated about having to dress provocatively, unable to understand the reason behind it. Even Ulfrid shared her confusion, joking about what he personally considered to be an attractive woman. The patrons inside the tavern laugh and chat, clearly having a good time together. Arthur couldn't help but feel his attention pulled toward a man standing alone in the corner. The waitress arrived at their table with the food, and Ulfrid instructed her to bring an additional 2 bowls for the slaves. She shot them a look full of disgust, her irritation clear as she walked away. Mika eagerly drank the ale, savoring its delicious flavor with every gulp. Arthur became alert, noticing a group of people stealthily approaching them, and immediately sensed that something was wrong. The advice given to the slave master is to avoid indulging his slaves excessively. Ulfrid firmly insists that handling the situation is his responsibility. The tavern owners make it clear that their establishment holds more secrets than it appears, revealing to him that they have a whole group of slaves available for his inspection. Ulfrid refuses to even glance that way, but Arthur and Micah can barely contain their rage after learning that these criminals have captured women and young girls as slaves. To make matters worse, their captives also include dwarves and elves. Ulfrid, feeling exhausted and on the verge of passing out, took a moment to warn the 2 troublemakers that any form of interracial slavery was absolutely forbidden. The group burst into laughter at him, mocking that this was precisely the reason their slaves commanded such high prices. Dilly questioned in her mind the reasons behind the varying worth placed on humans, dwarves, and elves. The statement suggests that trust is delicate. While it requires effort and commitment to build, it can be shattered quickly and effortlessly. The leader longs for the confidence of his followers, but by making the tough decision to lead them into war, he is destined to forfeit all the trust they have placed in him once they learn their lives are at stake. Arthur is overwhelmed by guilt, believing that Virion would empower the people only if he disclosed the offer to everyone. He realizes that such a revelation could inspire the citizens to rise up and challenge their rulers. The elderly elf insisted that the era of kings had already ended. According to him, this conflict would touch the lives of everyone, regardless of their position in society. Therefore, he believed it was fair that each individual should have the freedom to decide for themselves. In the following scene, Arthur appeared weary as he attempted to unwind by himself. Sylvie gestured toward Ellie, who was standing in the garden. For some unknown reason, fear is evident on the young girl's face. Arthur and Sylvie notice something unusual as they examine the scene more closely. They observe her engaged in conversation with an odd clown, who behaves as if he's delivering an important lecture to an audience. Fortunately, the girl's fiercely loyal bear steps in, determined to set things right. The creature lifted the man into the air, and it became clear that his very life force was being drained away. In a fit of rage, Boo hurled his belongings onto the neighboring planet. Ellie needed to remind her companion that tossing people into outer space all the time wasn't acceptable. The moment she saw Arthur, she rushed over and wrapped him in a warm, affectionate embrace, overjoyed by his return. The boy finds himself bewildered by the sudden focus on him. At this moment, his reputation has soared, with every noble on the Dickathon knowing who he is. The furious bear, known for its fondness for tossing people around, he and Arthur exchanged intense glances for a moment, but soon reached an understanding, reconnecting as if they had been close friends separated for years. Ellie could hardly believe how quickly the two had become friends, especially since she vividly recalled that their first encounter had nearly ended with Arthur being crushed by this very person. Arthur, exuding confidence, explained that men who share the same goals often form strong connections in no time. It was clear that his words rang true. His sister felt immense relief having him by her side, knowing he was the one person capable of protecting her from them. Arthur feels a wave of confusion wash over him as he tries to figure out who the people being referred to are in this moment. The young girl felt a wave of sorrow as she confessed that the issue concerned her parents. The two had made up their minds to enlist in the war. In the following scene, Arthur made his way toward the door of his parents' bedroom. His sister's words continued to echo in his thoughts. He struggles with guilt over attempting to prevent his parents from enlisting in the war. Deep down, he knows that their remarkable strength could prove invaluable to their allies. Arthur's hand trembled when he extended it toward the door. The boy reflected on the reality that they might be putting their lives in danger at the front. Deep down, his sole, self-centered desire was to prevent that from happening. He rapped on the door before stepping inside without delay. Reynolds and Alice continued with their daily tasks. The sudden appearance of the boy caught everyone off guard, as none of them had expected to see him again so quickly. Arthur gathered up his equipment, suddenly aware that the others had planned to depart without even acknowledging his presence. The words stung him, but Alice quickly explained that they had only been getting ready and waiting for his return, hoping to clear up the confusion. Arthur admitted his surprise at the group's decision to embark on such a dangerous mission before Ellie had fully grown. In response, Reynolds mentions that Virion had given them the same warning, but had also offered them the chance to resist if Arthur were to come back. Worry spread across the boy's features when he understood that his return had caused his parents to become involved in the conflict. They discovered that Helen had contacted them through a transmission call. As they were about to exit the dungeon, news of a last assault reached them, causing Arthur's expression to shift instantly into one of sheer terror. Everyone waited, eager to hear what they would say next. He struggled to comprehend how such an event could occur so unexpectedly. Just the day before, he had visited the place himself and defeated every monster there by himself, even taking down the boss monster. Everything changes when Arthur discovers a secret passage concealed within the walls, which allows even more beasts to suddenly emerge without warning. Reynolds, struggling with emotion, explained that the Twin Horns group had chosen to remain behind so the other adventurers could escape, a decision that ultimately resulted in a heartbreaking outcome.